Morning, everybody. Welcome to today's hearing of submissions. I'm Sophie, the Democracy Services Advisor. I'll now invite the panel to elect a chair.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Ferguson as our chair this morning.
I'll second that.
Very good.
Thanks.
All in favour?
Straight into the frying pan.
Thank you now, good.
Couldn't get off the link fast enough.
Morena, good morning, everybody. Councillor Ferg, so as you heard, I'll be the chair of this hearings panel. Thank you for coming along on a Monday morning to be a part of this. We look forward to your submissions. Just to introduce everybody to you, Councillor Matt Wong and Councillor Lisa Guy. We have our staff members Sophie, Brianna and Jeannie over here. And we have Sophie Miller, who's introduced herself as our Democracy Services Advisor. Morena to press and other members of the public who might be out there who are taking an interest in this. Of course, the hearings panel was established at the hearing of submissions for the Taumata-o-Hakitekura, Lomond and Tapunui Queenstown Hill Management Reserve Management Plan, held today, is empowered to consider submissions and to hear those that are speaking to their submissions this morning, today, and make a recommendation to the Community and Services Committee on the final form of the Lomond Queenstown Hill Reserve Management Plan. Apologies, well, there are no apologies here this morning. Declarations of conflict of interest. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Matt?
Yes, thank you. So I'm just running through a few here. Fernhill resident. I'm also a councillor appointed to the Fernhill Sunshine Bay Community Association. My wife has made an individual submission as well as on behalf of the Fernhill Sunshine Bay Community Association. And I'm also a business owner that borders on the boundary of the reserve. So there is some impact there with certain decisions that may be made.
Thank you, Matt. We'll note those conflicts of interest. There's, on advice taken, there's no reason to disqualify Matt from the process as a member of the hearings panel and to ultimately vote whichever way this goes. So thank you for that, Matt. No resolution is required there, just as long as they're noted. Thank you, Sophie. Confirmation of the agenda, that the agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. You do need a motion there. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Matt. Seconder? I'll second that. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. The reporting officer summary, the hearing report of the Taumata-o-Hakitekura, Lomond and Tapunui Reserve Management Plan. We have our staff with us. Our reporting officer is invited to speak to the hearing panel report, and questions may be asked from the panel as well, Matt and Lisa. Thank you, staff. Jeannie.
Yeah, kia ora everybody. I'm Jeannie Galavazzi and been in the Parks Planning team for quite a long time, and this particular management plan has been a really important one to the staff and to the community, and just like to acknowledge the community's input into this plan. The reserve management plan is sort of an agreement between council and the community as to the vision and how the reserve will be managed on and for and on behalf of the community. So appreciate that some of you have been waiting for this review for quite a long time, so thank you for your patience. And yeah, we just acknowledge it. It's a really important document, covers such a broad range of issues and opportunities, but it's been really evident through the submission process the importance of these reserves to our town and to our community, which is really great to see. So just a bit of context, has been quite a long time coming because we really acknowledge the importance of getting this particular plan right. There are a couple of other documents and processes also at play at the moment. One is the Queenstown Hill Forestry Plan, and the other one is our proposed district plan and the open space and recreation zone, and particularly as it relates to Lomond. That's also pending completion of this reserve management plan before we go resolve some of those matters as well. So it's important, and thank you for today.
Thank you, Jeannie. So what are we looking at here? Just for clarity in terms of once we get to the end, this document sits for what, the next 10 years?
That's a general guide. Management plans should be kept relevant and live. So ideally, we would be continually updating them and reviewing them. That's in an ideal world. You might notice the date on the existing management plan. So, but I think that once, hopefully, we get the bones of it right, and so it doesn't need constant changes and reviews, but also they are pretty high profile and reasonably complex reserves with a number of different activities. So it wouldn't be unusual to see a minor change or a review of a part of the plan in a few years' time.
Matt, any questions?
Well, let's start with, were you happy with the level of submissions? And do you think you got a diverse range of submitters? And was there anyone that you thought should have submitted, but that we didn't hear from?
I might defer to Sophie. She is the expert on all of this.
Very good. Yeah, no, we were impressed with the number of submissions that came through, so 106 in total, and they came from a broad range across the commercial the interests, particularly in Lomond, and then also more widely from interested community groups, the biking, the community mountain biking, and other clubs came through strongly. So we did feel that the submissions covered sort of all of the different uses of the reserves, and strongly reflected that they're really highly valued as recreation spaces. And so, yeah, we weren't certain of the number of, or we weren't sure about the amount of submissions that we would receive. And so, yeah, we were happy with those 106 that came in. Yeah.
You did a good job by the looks of it, so well done. Secondly, just touching on how dynamic this management plan can be, there's a few submitters here that talk about the commercial use and whether that's expansion on the current form of their operations or brand new, not even consented yet operations. How does this management plan stay flexible, I guess, to some of those needs? Tricky question, I know, sorry.
Yeah, well, that's our job collectively to ensure that we write, you know, quality objectives and policies that are flexible enough to be future focused, but also are worded strongly enough to ensure that we are enabled to make good decisions when there are complicated questions asked of the management plan. That's the intent of it, that it helps us answer those questions that arise in the future, but we can't anticipate all the different projects and different requests that we'll get.
Job ahead of us then.
You with that, Matt?
Yep, thank you.
Lisa?
Thank you. Following on a little bit about what Matt's raised around the need for us to be flexible and dynamic, is there much of a framework currently for actually clarifying our commercial activities against reserve usage, or is that in part just shaped by the BAU and existing use we've got? Like, say, clear criteria that we can assess different proposals against within reserve usage across the district, or is it kind of been from our adoption of things that have evolved over time?
So we do take it case by case, and sometimes, you know, based on each reserve. I guess that's the advantage of having a up-to-date relevant management plan for those reserves, because it does provide that framework and it does provide that guide. We also rely heavily on the Reserves Act processes around, you know, if something has been anticipated in a reserve management plan, then that can be a helpful pathway to make that decision. But if something hasn't been anticipated at all in those policies, then we have the ability to go out for full public notification and seek submissions. And there's always that next step as well for particular activities, is that leasing and licensing process as well. So where you can have a specific version of this process where you're seeking submissions and having hearings. But do we have a framework district-wide for commercial use of the public land? Not a district-wide one.
So case by case in reserves, could that be an outcome of an RMP like this, that we did look per reserve as to something of a criteria framework?
I think that's what we're doing in
Because,
that
yeah.
process, yeah.
Maybe as well, we could look at definition of like commercial recreation and commercial activities and then recreation. So I think that's something that we can look to address further within this plan in terms of definitions, and then
That's
frame that
helpful.
around each reserve to say what's appropriate at each.
Yeah.
I think
we're finding that.
Can I just clarify, you're sort of implying that there is obviously the activities that occur on the reserve that are specific to that reserve and benefit that reserve versus a separate commercial activity which might be located, for example, that might not be directly related to the reserve itself. Is that?
Yeah, I think my line of thinking, and it will become clearer as I hear from the submitters and yourselves today, it's falling into two kind of barrels of thought, and one is how do we create clear guidance around value uplift of our public lands by all users, and what is the fair exchange for that?
Yeah.
So what contribution comes back to public good? And then my next question is around the interdependencies of all of these parts, which is another whole massive piece of work. And I know you've considered it so much, as have many of the submissions that we've read. And we're starting to get these interdependencies now with new developments on the fringes of reserves. Of course, our interdependencies with mana whenua, and how we went about consultation to ensure that we embed these values, the interdependencies and some of the user conflicts that have come out of the submissions. So I'm curious as to whether we can put some frameworks in that can help us navigate those with a little more clarity as we work through. So yeah, perhaps just sharing that gives you some understanding of where my pre-reading was. I think we're a bit scattergun still in how we're looking at some of that.
Just to quickly comment, ultimately, how they classified under the Reserves Act and the reasons why that land was set aside is a really good starting point for us as well. So whether it's a recreation reserve or a local purpose reserve, and recreation reserves are their primary uses for the public enjoyment of that reserve. So that's a really good starting point. And obviously both of these two reserves are recreation reserves. They do have some water supply purposes as well, and there are a number of other infrastructure uses as well. But ultimately, what was that land set aside for? That's the starting point.
Yeah, okay, so just one small example there where we've got some rising user conflicts between biking and walking, for example, and in particular things like the time trail on Queenstown Hill and Tiki Trail and various access pathways through Lomond. If those were designated walking way back in their assigned use, does that carry merit to embed those as?
That's the role of the management plan. It's to provide clear guidance on how those particular activities should be managed. It's at that more granular level, but we need to be,
because we're seeing this come up in other reserve conversations as well. Arrowtown, we've got the Millennium Walking Track, and with the growth and enthusiasm we have around biking and submissions from biking, it's people asking, well, are those designations that were originally for walking, do they hold significance, or is it all up for review?
Yeah, well, that's the challenge, to have a relevant management plan today that addresses those questions, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sorry, yeah, I've got another question here, just around, there's a few submitters that were talking about unauthorised trails, biking trails, and the definition of those legal or operational definitions. Just wondering if I can get your comment on that, how we define an unauthorised trail and identify those in the first place. You know, some of these trails have been around for 20 odd years or so. Can we be clearer, I guess, in the management plan definition, and how would that help us?
Yeah, there has been a submission or a couple of submissions that refer to terminology and clarity of
Yeah.
definitions, and perhaps that could be resolved by having a definition section in the reserve management plan. I don't think the intent of the use of that word changes, whether it's unauthorised or hasn't been sanctioned by council or isn't part of an approved plan, whatever, but yeah, that could be resolved by having that schedule of definitions.
And do you have an understanding of how many we're talking about here in terms of unauthorised trails that we may be looking at authorising? Or is that a question you don't want me to ask?
I looked at the Strava.
They do cross, a majority of them do cross private and reserve land, so they're not just within the reserve.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's something that needs to be addressed, because they don't start and stop within the reserve land. There are some, so
Yes.
maybe we can consider those, but the ones that cross multiple land areas, we can only comment on what's in the reserve. So I think that's something that we need to look at.
I think one of the
Today.
challenges we've got is how do we stop this creep from happening, where the plan should come first versus, you know, us being forced to make these authorised trails because they exist now. Anyway, side point. One further clarification here is a few submitters have just talked about the lease areas, easements, and the accuracy of the leased areas in the maps. I'm just wondering whether we will look at clarifying some of those areas and making sure they're more accurate. Like, did you have any comment on that as well or not?
Yeah, we definitely want to make sure that
Yeah.
plan is factually correct.
Yeah.
So if there are any of those
So we'll address
changes,
those.
then yes, they should be addressed.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, mate.
My tagging on to the end of Matt's point there, I suppose that's where I came back to framework again as well, was around the mountain biking trails. Do we have some kind of framework that assesses you know, even the usability or environmental impact of a trail, or the safety of a trail, or how it's been constructed, or what land it crosses over, or what contribution is able to be attributed to its maintenance and its upkeep, and just all those bits, because, you know, looking at that Strava heat map and appreciating the proliferation and interest in this as a sport, it just sort of, the very nature of it is that while trails are appealing, but as soon as we become the PCBU for those trails, I just have some concerns around, you know, have we got a criteria that we can go, yes, this is one that we would authorise, but then what does that entail us as ratepayer response? Does that mean we've got to pay for it? Does that mean we're responsible if someone's injured on it? All of those bits.
Yeah, once it's an official trail within our network, I think you can look to the Lomond Reserve where there are trails, they're signposted, they're within the network, they're graded, they're assessed annually for the health and safety. We understand, you know, the water management, etc. on them, and then there's some maintenance involved in that, and there's a cost associated with that. We haven't, while we're aware of the trails and the team members are looking at the state of them, we haven't done a formal assessment to understand. I guess that's the other thing, is across the two land parcels as well, that's a question to decide, you know, is it appropriate for them to travel through two sections, and how do you access them? So there's a few questions around that, but we haven't carried out a full assessment to understand the cost and the grading of them all at the moment that we can present in this forum.
Yeah, I think to acknowledge that that is a piece of work, and it is quite operational, that that's the intent of the trail master plan, and that would have those specific frameworks around when the trail would be
So
approved,
that's
that
referred
process.
to in the submissions as well. Is that a council master plan with input from the mountain biking club? And do the mountain biking club have like the equivalent of the Trails Trust that are developing the recreational trails? Is there a body that is developing a master plan of mountain biking? And this,
We've got some policies in here that support actually looking at that. And
That would follow on.
that would follow on from this, it's that
So that would
operational
be the
document.
next drop down
Yeah.
from this, it
Yeah.
doesn't already exist.
And in this plan, we've said that we need that strategic document to understand what's on both and what's appropriate to bring into the network. So that is a policy within this plan that's
One of
saying
those
we need to
into
do
the
that, working
community.
with the community to
Yeah.
have that then for that future vision of the site. So that's, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I could-
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, staff. Before we get to our first submitter here this morning, I think from the discussion maybe that you've heard over the last 20 minutes, we've got a big job in front of us with regards to two very important parts of our geography here in the basin. I do note, and want everybody present and those listening that councillors have a very busy week this week, but that's the job. So in terms of getting ourselves to deliberations, which will be in public, we have some commitments and other council meetings that we have to attend. So we'll be bouncing our way through as we go through our submitters. Once we get towards the end, where we sit time-wise, we do have a window of opportunity at the end before the first of the commitments kick in later on this afternoon. So hopefully we'll be able to get the deliberations underway once we adjourn the hearing. As chair, I'm always a fan of getting out and having a look firsthand at whatever you're dealing with, whether it be people, whether it be fauna or trees or hills or mountains. So the indication from the panel is that they would like to undertake site visits. And at this point, not really knowing where we're going at the moment because we're only getting underway, is that we're looking at Wednesday as a day where we will undertake site visits to further clarify whatever we are thinking. So just to make you all aware of that, we'll get through today. Once we get towards the end, we'll be in a more clearer position to understand when deliberations will kick in, when we'll get to our site visit, just to keep you all informed. So thank you all for turning up and taking time out of your day. Our first speaker here this morning, and that's just going to cost me okay.
Yeah.
Carrot,
Okay.
please.
That hasn't happened for a while. First of our speakers here, Sean Dent and Wayne Rose from Skyline Enterprises Limited. 10 minutes generally. We tend to be pretty relaxed, well, about time, but we don't allow it to drag. But obviously, it's important you get your message out there. And any questions from councillors, they'll fire them at you. But thank you. Nice to see you this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a short summary statement I was going to read through. I've got a copy here if you would like.
Yes, pass them around. Thank you. Sophie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Sean Dent. I'm a resource management planning consultant and as director of Southern Planning Group Limited. And I'm appearing today on behalf of Skyline Enterprises Limited. And I have with me Mr. Wayne Rose, the general manager for Skyline. I intend to highlight and provide clarity on the key points of the Skyline submission and note that both Mr. Rose and I are happy to answer questions and provide any further clarification requested by the panel. The Skyline submission outlined that the Ben Lomond Recreation Reserve and the Bob's Peak area in particular is an icon destination. It is a high-profile, popular destination affording high-quality and memorable visitor experiences that can and should be managed to foster domestic and international tourism. As outlined in paragraph 8 of the submission, Skyline is seeing 800 to 900,000 gondola passengers annually. The QLDC's proposed district plan recognises the importance of this icon destination with a specific objective of development subzone. I can just take that objective as read, Mr. Chair. Accordingly, whilst the PDP and the Reserve Management Plan are developed and administered under separate legislation, having a consistent management framework between the two documents, in my opinion, is helpful in achieving effective and consistent decisions when applications are made for activities within the Recreation Reserve. In this regard, the Skyline submission explained that a rezoning proposal had already been put forward under the RMA to expand to the west the PDP's informal recreation zone, Bob's Peak area, that encompasses the existing commercial recreation facilities on Bob's Peak. The intention of such zoning is to be enabling of a limited amount of future commercial recreation development upon Bob's Peak, and specifically noting that this area would not have any exclusivity for Skyline. This zoning proposal has been subject to Environment Court appeals for several years that have been on hold awaiting the outcome of the review of the Reserve Management Plan. Essentially, it has become a chicken and egg scenario as to which document the planning process should be completed first so as to inform the other. It has been agreed by Council, Skyline and Ziptrek to await the outcome on the Reserve Management Plan before mediation on these outstanding appeals. It is my opinion that in recognition of the icon destination status of Bob's Peak area, identifying a sensitively located, in landscape terms, area for consideration of future commercial recreation development proposals in the management plan would be an appropriate direction under the Reserves Act, and notwithstanding what the future outcome of those outstanding appeals may be. As noted in the submission, the proposed expansion of Bob's Peak area zoning has previously been assessed and supported by two experienced landscape architects, Michelle Snodgrass for Skyline and Dr. Marion Reid for Council. And specifically, in rebuttal of evidence for the Council, Dr. Reid stated, following a site visit where these new boundaries were identified on the ground, I am confident that they are, in the main, located appropriately from a landscape perspective. That is, they provide a degree of containment to the proposed subzone. As such, it is my opinion that it would be appropriate to acknowledge this area, and I recommend that it be identified as a new Appendix 4 in the management plan and a new policy be included which supports considering the grant of lease or license agreements for development located in that area. In regard to wildfire risk is a significant impediment to the management of an icon destination and the commercial facilities in the Ben Lomond Recreation Reserve, but it appears to have been given minimal discussion within the draft management plan. Section 9.3 in particular needs to set a clear objective or priority action for wildfire management, i.e. to proactively reduce the risk of wildfire by expediting removal of wilding conifers. My opinion, given the overall popularity of the reserve, evidenced by Skyline's annual gondola passenger numbers, and the potential financial and reputational impacts on the commercial operations of Skyline and other commercial operators, is that a clear outcome to reduce the wildfire risk by expediting wilding conifer removal must be included in section 9.3. Further, this section should articulate a clear objective or priority action to establish a fire break around the commercial recreation facilities that exist on Bob's Peak. These longer-term priority actions were suggested in the submission with the proposed new objective and policy, and I'll take those as read, Mr. Chairman. In the interim, until such measures can and have been implemented to reduce the wildfire risk to a tolerable level, it is my opinion that policy 14.311, which provides for reserve closures, should be amended to provide clearer direction as to how and when those closures will occur, i.e. that this occurs in accordance with the QLDC's Wildfire Reserve Closure Plan and the Bob's Peak Operators Voluntary Wildfire Summer Plan, including any subsequent variations and revisions as approved by Fire and Emergency New Zealand. Mr. Rose was directly involved in the development of the Bob's Peak Operators Voluntary Wildfire Summer Plan and is available to take questions from the panel on how this was developed and how it will operate to mitigate the current levels of wildfire risk and enable commercial operations to continue. The matter of a revegetation strategy is also interlinked with the comments outlined above regarding fire risk and the removal of the wilding conifers within the reserve. Skyline fully supports the potential restoration, preservation and enhancement of the natural values of the Ben Lomond Reserve through reforestation of low flammability native species and a mix of non-invasive exotics. However, the draft management plan specifies that a revegetation strategy is essential to replace the tree canopy. I agree that this is essential for landscape, natural hazard, stormwater and recreation management of the reserve. And as such, a revegetation strategy should have been developed and consulted on as part of this wider management plan review, as the issues and outcomes are undoubtedly interconnected. In this regard, I note that the council has just notified the draft Queenstown Gardens tree succession plan for feedback. In hindsight, development of a similar plan for the Ben Lomond Recreation Reserve that could have informed or been appended to the draft management plan would have been highly beneficial. However, acknowledging that council is unlikely to pause the finalisation of this draft management plan to develop a revegetation strategy, it is my opinion that the next best alternative is to ensure that policy 14.3.2 that requires the development and implementation of a forestry management plan followed by a revegetation program is subject to a specific and very short timeframe for this hugely important action to be progressed. Without a specified timeframe, experience suggests that development of these vitally important plans could take years. Proposed policy 14.5.2.1, the draft management plan seeks to enable the granting of licences for grazing to prevent reinvasion of wilding conifers where it doesn't impede regeneration of native biodiversity, and this is strongly supported by Skyline. Grazing is a low impact and cost effective way to manage large areas of land in the reserve that are otherwise not utilised and can aid in reducing wildfire risk. It would also be an appropriate management control in the Ben Lomond Reserve within the Skyline easement for the gondola corridor and the adjacent land containing the power lines where vegetation is not desirable and wilding conifers have recently been removed, and while there is currently no revegetation strategy in place. I note that these activities are specifically enabled through sections 71 and 72 of the Reserves Act, and maintaining this policy in the management plan is therefore entirely consistent with the Act. In full completeness, it is also noted that grazing of livestock in the PDP's informal recreation zone and the Ben Lomond subzone is also a permitted activity, and therefore maintaining policy 14.5.2.1 would helpfully be a consistent management approach between both planning documents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Matt?
I'll kick us
Councillor
off.
Wong?
Thank you. Just with fire risk, it's been a hot topic, excuse the pun. Can you elaborate on the proposed fire break and then the Boggs Peak Operators Wildlife Summit plan and what that might look like in terms of what you're proposing?
So the wildfire plan, the operational plan for 24-25 was in effect. It will be up for review again at the end of this calendar year. Currently, or originally, we were approved to operate at a level of 700 people on site at any given time. This was far below the requirements of the business, would have been commercially and reputationally detrimental. With the support of FENS, we proved that we could evacuate 800 people in any given hour, in any given 20 minutes from that site. There was also a review of an internal space, which through the support of FENS and fire engineers, we were able to create a safe space for an additional 1,100 people. Again, this is still detrimental to the operation, and we are still at the mercy of reserve closures from a commercial perspective. If, as Sean alluded to in the document, there is a large event at any point in the future that we are unable to accommodate as a result of reserve closures, it's going to be extremely detrimental to conferencing in Queenstown. Not only conferencing in Queenstown, but the reputation of our business. Our hope is that moving forward, we can expedite the removal of these wilding conifers so they are no longer a risk to the business. And we are then able to have unhindered operations moving forward. At this stage, that is not the case. And we'll continue to be at the mercy of reserve closures.
Thank you.
Removal of our wildlands is paramount in so many of our conversations. What do we contribute in our annual budget or is it that towards wildland clearance?
We have 500, oh no, 450 was given to the Wakatipu group this year, and then it's managed through their operation, and then some money was given to the Upper Clutha. And I guess in terms of this is more the forest. So with the wilding program, they're looking at outliers and bringing the spread back in. So they probably aren't looking at concentrated area up there. You just wanting to know how much is.
Well, I just, let's say it's around about 500,000, 400,000 across our expenditure, a very limited budget already. And I know from hearing when Skyline came and presented to council around our wildfire risk. In an ideal world, we just go, yeah, let's pull out every fire starter today and get rid of it. Budget-wise, we just can't. And understand the need to kind of stagger things through. What do you see as the leaseholder as being, how can we look at partnerships and working other ways to address some of these concerns that you've got, especially if you want to brought forward and given more urgency? Our ratepayers haven't got bottomless pockets. How do you see it working as far as being able to bring some of these priorities forward and take into the other considerations, those operators which are suggesting that there is recreational value? And I'm not talking about the fire break areas, but in maintaining some recreational amenity up there of large established trees while we do come up with some sort of reforestation plan. Has Skyline given thought to what could come to the table for you guys?
Yeah, well, I guess as a starting point, we've removed every wilding conifer within our lease area along the gondola corridor. In addition to that, there's an adjacent triangle that we've removed over to the power lines to again reduce the risk. However, this is on QLDC land. We're in a position now where all of the remaining trees are outside of the Skyline lease. So that would need to be a conversation with council of how we could expedite that process.
And if I can just offer here as well, one of the suggestions we've said in the submission is to have a specific policy that recognising removing the wilding conifers or the forestry off the hill is not going to happen overnight, but an interim measure that could potentially happen reasonably quickly is to establish a fire break around those commercial businesses, and not just Skyline, but the other commercial operators on the big part of the hill. And if there was some specific policy that supported that or enabled that, and if Skyline as a commercial operator applied for the consent to undertake that work, that would be quite helpful in an RMA sense as well, because that management plan gives some direction to enabling those works to occur. And under the RMA, part of consideration of a resource consent, there's a requirement to consider any other relevant matters, and the Ben Lomond Reserve Management Plan would be a key matter for consideration. And again, having some clear direction that is actually supported would be really helpful in that process.
How many people are you talking about? Like you said, that these numbers just don't make it feasible, your operation. How many people are out there on an average day?
Up and around the site in January, could be over 2,000 people.
And you also spoke of other technologies that might be able to be added to increase safety. And I'm thinking of things referred to like water dowsing and things like that. What other infrastructure needs are there to actually enable some of those new technologies? And
over the next 12 months, we're looking at extinguishing factors, so water drenches, etc., on the exterior of the building in order to support this. We will continue to do so. We are, however, limited by the close proximity of the trees in the reserve.
Just while Lisa's writing, in terms of current council policies around fire risk and days closed, last summer, how many days were Skyline affected?
It was 0 last summer.
Yeah.
If I go back 2 years, it would have been 13 days in January.
Why do you think there was change in that? Is there different monitoring criteria or was the risk higher 2 years ago?
I think the risk was possibly higher 2 years ago. I think from a monitoring perspective, I would have to refer to parks and reserves. I think last year we just got rain at the right time.
So in terms of the impact of 13 days lost in 1 month, can you give us a rough figure or
Significant.
significant? Significant, thank you. Any more questions? No? Great, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to be here. Right, Paula Huggins, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you. Yes, and my name's Paula Huggins and I'm a structural engineer. But today I'm speaking as a private citizen and user of the parks. I have had both professional, some professional work I've done at on Ben Lomond Reserve over the years includes doing structural engineering work for Zip Track and some little bits and pieces for Skyline, so I'm quite familiar with what's there. I also tend to walk up Queenstown Hill every week, so I'm up with what's going on around the reserves. So my submission, I just wanted to just focus in on one particular area of the plan, which is to do with the Tiki Trail, and that was section 13.1.6 of the plan. And in my response, I did say that I was generally in favour of the plan, but I thought I should add some further commentary around the Tiki Trail. So in this plan, it talks about wanting to have the Tiki Trail as the main entrance for the Ben Lomond Reserve for those who are walkers. And I think that's a good idea because it enables a lot of people to go into the reserve and they can just walk straight from the CBD. It doesn't require car parking and so forth. Whereas walking up Queenstown Hill, a lot of people do struggle to walk up to the start of Queenstown Hill. And so we do see a lot more people driving up there to then commence their walk. Yeah, it is a very short walk from the CBD and which is obviously a good hub where there's accommodation. So it does make it a particularly good day activity for people who don't necessarily have the money to buy a ticket up to the gondola or perhaps want to use it for exercise purposes. So I know that there are like a group of adventure runners who like to run up the Tiki Trail on a, if not weekly basis. And looking at the types of submissions and people that the council have been, that was through the plan you've been looking at, I felt like those user groups just didn't really have a voice because we've obviously got the mountain bike club, but there's no users clubs or anything for the walkers. And given that so many of them are actual visitors to the district, they're not exactly going to be here to speak. So the objective, which was to recognise the Tiki Trail as the primary walking trail, I feel like that has probably already been realised because of the numbers and the popularity it has when you're looking at it on social media. And particularly if you start looking at people going beyond to the Ben Lomond Summit, like it's very, very busy when I'm there through the summer. There's a constant trail of people. a lot of those people will take the gondola and then walk. But given the choice, if there was a nice trail to start at the bottom, I'd say a lot of people would do that as well. Looking at the Tiki Trail itself though, I would say that as you make your way up the hill, there are actually some really beautiful vantage points that look down over the CBD that we're probably not taking advantage of. And not everyone necessarily will have the ability to walk all the way up to the skyline-based building, but we could certainly create an easier walk up to a certain vantage point for visitors to come take photos and do that sort of thing. So my recent observations on the trail is that it is in very poor condition, probably made worse obviously by the cemetery gully slip at the moment, which is being repaired as we speak. There is a lot of overgrown exotic weed species that really does diminish the experience. And the sections of the path are unreasonably steep. So that makes it very difficult for the type of visitor who is using the trail. And certainly I'd say a lot worse than the average dock track, even those that are very, very steep, let's say. I think we all understand that the signage and wayfinding around the top of the trail, around the gondola base is quite confusing still, but that's obviously because there's works going on there. And ideally, it would be good if the Tiki Trail could be more directly connected to the Ben Lomond Trail, rather than necessarily needing to traverse the maze through the gondola and luge areas. And I do notice in some areas, the Tiki Trail doesn't necessarily cross the mountain bike path, which does also mean that it is a more attractive trail to take. There's only the section at the very start by the cemetery where it crosses the mountain bike track at the bottom, which we're currently working on to build a bridge over, so that will there won't be that conflict. But there is a bit of dust nuisance from the mountain bike track when you're walking in summer, and so it would be really good if at that lower area there was also some planting or something that could just help control that dust nuisance, which probably does affect the cemetery as well. So some of my recommendations around the track would be to really look at some of the, to gradually upgrade the trail to provide some stair and step access in areas where it's particularly steeply graded, as would be normally expected in a trail. I think that there needs to be more active removal of the invasive exotic plants and replacing those with native species. Obviously clear of wayfinding and, as I said, some planting separation from the mountain bike track would be really beneficial. And I would really like to see a scenic viewing platform with some seating partway up, so that it creates a destination, visitors, so they don't necessarily feel like the destination is to go all the way to the gondola building, which is it's a very hard walk for the average person. And I've sort of, I have observed that over the last 20 years where I have been going in through the reserve, it has been degrading over time. I think that there has been just a general lack of love for it. And yet the amount of visitors going through there has really been increasing. But I see that this could be a very easy trail that could actually cater for a lot of visitors and have not too much detriment on town, given that there's no transportation needed to get there, so forth. In the plan, and just a few things there, it looks like it was indicated to be used as a user group 3, which would be challenging, and this is according to the sort of dot guidelines. And I'm not exactly sure if that's the right fit, given that it is so steep. But yeah, with good rest areas and seated areas along the way at times, then it can certainly be of that experience level. I've also sort of been listening, that I've realised that at times the reserve does need to be closed off. So I do feel like it is important that we do have one main pedestrian access to the reserve, which would be via the bridge at the cemetery. And that way it would be easy to control because we can put a gate there if we want to prevent visitors going in, whether that's during times of fire danger and so forth. And I would probably discourage having other entrance points, say from the campground and other areas. I feel that this would make it more difficult to close off, but then we also potentially then have more trails to create. And I don't see the need for that. I think where it is actually quite a perfect location. So in all of this, I was sort of wondering whether with the support of the council, I would be quite happy to initiate a Friends of Witiki Trail group, because I realise a lot of this work would need a reasonable amount of voluntary help, and that I would certainly be happy to do that. And such a group would also provide a local community walking, sort of hiking users group that the council could then consult with around management issues. Yeah, so that's sort of all there is from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, councillors?
Questions?
Councillor Wong?
I've got a few different ones here.
Yeah.
But I'll just try and keep it as basic as I can. So there's no walkers user group or no walkers club?
Not that I'm aware of, and certainly not specific to, like, it's very specific. We have the mountain biking club,
Yes.
which very much is, you know, predominantly on Ben Lomond, but I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, because I
Users
do agree
like
with you
this.
there. I mean,
Yeah.
a users group or a walking group would be a great start to actually get some interest in that trail. And I have walked that trail with my two young children, so I actually understand exactly what you're talking about with the quality of the track and steepness, and there's a few dodgy bits here and there, and signage.
Yeah,
You know, we're
yeah.
picking up tourists and sending them in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I do understand what you're
Yeah.
talking about there. So in terms of, because you've got a little bit of an understanding about maybe track costs and those sorts of things, do you have an understanding of sort of what sort of costs might be involved to implement some of these base changes?
I can't really talk about cost, but I do believe that it's something that certainly will be done gradually, and there are some gnarly pieces towards the bottom that I don't believe would be particularly difficult. Some of those areas will be fixed as part of the cemetery gully clearance works, but we'll sort of need to see where it ends up once they've, you know, cleared that area.
And do you have any understanding of sort of, or data on the users themselves? Are they visitors? Are they locals? There's obviously a mixture.
Just from my observations, I would say most of them are foreign tourists who are making their way up. And like I said, I think a lot of them are sort of more the backpacker traveller who doesn't necessarily have a lot of money, who are very much here to do a lot of the free walks and things.
The only reason I ask that is because there potentially is an option available to get some donations, I guess, from those using the trail.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Which could help.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Guy?
Yeah, my question was perhaps to staff, do we know what sort of numbers are going up the ticket bar, or?
We have a track counter on it, and it didn't get affected by the storm event. And then we've had some, also it's been vandalised a couple of times, so I'm not too sure if it is it. Stephen will be able to tell me. If
Roughly about 50,000.
we have put it back, but obviously we've missed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, we have it above zip tree, so we don't capture, so that's exclusive of zip tree's users.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, because you're taking on board everything you're saying, and I think the bit that's really paramount underlying all of this is the iconic nature of the reserve and the destination, and it's always been a thing to go and walk the bin when you moved here. At some point in life, you need to take that challenge off. And I also think of our consultation with my whenua around the actual origins of our legends of, just imagine that Wahine Toa up there at Big Lomond. I bet the path she picked on her race down the mountain before she swam across the lake was probably the Tiki Trail, because it was the fastest path down. So I think there's a real opportunity here for us to showcase some of our mana whenua values, to really get that narrative going, but picking up on what Councillor Wong and a constant cry is here is where do we find the money, and not being able to earmark our international visitor levy or even have a visitor contribution. I'm reassured from someone as experienced as yourself to say that there's not a lot of user conflict there. Perhaps with goats might be the greatest user conflict.
But I think that it is quite ideal,
and perhaps seeking a staged pathway forward to create lower level experiences on that trail, where at the moment everything's happening up high. So I'd really like to thank you for your submission. It was, and what I'm hearing from our community is a call for recognition from our walkers and our hikers, who perhaps by the very nature of their experience are more individual and haven't come together as collective users, is to say which parts of our trails do we designate for that. And I do also see the significance of the emergency retreat path. I think the more ways we have to get off that hill fast as possible in an emergency situation, then we look to press but thank you for offering your energy towards volunteer work as well. It's great to hear that enthusiasm for a reserve we all love and care about so much. So thanks.
Thank you, councillor. Yeah, just to reiterate councillor Guy's comments, thank you for your submission, and certainly that was going to be my comment, was around the increased awareness of walkers in our council life and approaches with people. So thank you for bringing that to our attention and for your submission. It's certainly noted. We'll see where that leads. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, number 3, Bowen Peak Limited, Guy Hingston. That's Guy here. Thank you for attending, Guy.
Morena.
Roughly about 10 minutes, but we'll see where we lead. Standards been set.
Been informed by council staff I'm allowed to give you photography. Although I'm heartened to hear of a potential site visit to the powerhouse on Wednesday, and if that's a possibility, I would love to meet you there and show you in person what we're thinking.
Thank you.
My name's Guy Hingston. I'm a cancer surgeon of nearly 30 years, and I've been a part-time resident in Fernhill for nearly a dozen years, and have been watching quietly around the reserve, using the reserve, thinking about how to create win-win solutions for everyone here. And when in November this plan came up for public submission, the timing was significant for us because in December the New Zealand government passed the Fast Track Approvals Act, which enabled us in February this year to lodge our fast track application over a number of activities within the reserve. And in March, 2 months ago, we were informed that our application had passed its compliance. It was compliant with the government requirements, and we're now waiting to hear if the government are going to approve our stage 1 referral application, which our submission relates to. We've entitled our application and our submission around the powerhouse. We see the powerhouse as something that's very significant historically, something that we want to promote and protect. It's hidden away. I know a lot of residents in Queenstown don't know of its existence. and a lot more tourists don't know either. It is a significant size, and I think the first thing I'd like to communicate to the hearing panel members is we're wanting to promote and protect this, not just you can use it as a. The next page, I point out the outstanding natural landscape of the Ben Lomond Reserve. Might be easier if I walk the three of you through this document so that we can talk to it. Councillor Guy, maybe just go back a couple of pages to this. Third page. Yeah. Thank you. I want to point out that the mechanical lift structures that we're investigating placing on the reserve are minimally visible. You can see, if you look carefully in the middle of this photograph, there is a funicular railway and a predator-free fence, but it is actually hidden away within this landscape. Primarily, I'm giving you a verbal presentation this morning in support of the 20 points that I've asked you to consider rewording or editing in the current reserve management plan. But I need you to have a bigger feel for what we're entailing than just the words that I've asked you to consider changing. If you turn to the next page, again, there's some photography that demonstrates the beauty of the Powerhouse Reserve and the 1 Mile Creek area. But the following page then shows the bad side. The track closure, which I feel should be more accurately documented in the current reserve management plan. It's an important track. We've just talked about the Tiki Trail. I would suggest that the 1 Mile Creek walking track is just as important, yet it is closed for appropriate reasons. It's not safe. If someone slips deep into the gully, a rescue helicopter would have a lot of difficulty extracting that person. So it's in our view, it is appropriately closed, but this should be documented to the community that it is closed, that the reasons for it. And we ask you as hearing panel members to look at the plan and think how you can adequately inform the community through this plan that this is the case, so that solutions can be found. I'm sure we all agree about the overgrown wilding conifers and what they're doing to the reserve. Our push to you this morning is for the three of you to consider what the wilding conifers are doing to the 1 Mile Creek Reserve. We have in this generation a chance to remedy this before they completely suppress the beautiful New Zealand native beech trees beneath that are remnant along the creek itself, of which we've provided some photos here. And I think it's important we think it's important that the three of you appreciate that this is time limited. If this generation doesn't act to remove these conifers overlying the remnant trees up along the 1 Mile Creek, then that chance will be gone. The next page I have is some photos of the historic pipe going up to the dam. Again, these are structures which we would like to both promote and protect for future generations. The next page, looking at a couple of photos from Zealandia, and I ask the three of you to seriously consider the impact that Zealandia has had on Wellington with bird life. In the 26-year history of Zealandia, the Wellington city bird life has been transformed. And our submission to the government part of our submission to the government is to allow us as a public-private partnership to establish essentially 180, 200 hectare predator-free sanctuary or perimeter fence around this remnant bush to give the tuis, the korimakos, the kiraroos the chance to nest without ferrets, stoats, possums, rats, taking the young, the eggs, the young hatchlings out from the nest and not giving them a chance to grow. I think if our community, through a public-private partnership or whatever structure over the next decade or two, could establish a Zealandia type sanctuary that would transform the New Zealand native bird life across the wider Queenstown basin, as per the Wellington experience. And again, I ask you to support in our written submission this in your review. We are proposing a new ski field. New Zealand hasn't had a new ski field since the Remarkables 35, 40 years ago. This is a significant development which we are seeking New Zealand government approval for. Again, we seek your support and at a minimum your acknowledgement that Bowen Peak Limited is trying to get this off the ground to make it a win-win for all concerned. The last part of my verbal submission is I would like to draw your attention to the concept sketch that several consultants and Bowen Peak Limited team members put together. I'll just show you. It's near the end of our submission. If I have the opportunity on Wednesday to walk you through the sketch on the ground, I would greatly value that. I think that's important for the three of you to consider. We're asking for your support to have a public-private partnership between Bowen Peak Limited and Council Reserve team and Jeannie to enhance, to promote, to protect what's already there, but to remove the wilding pine conifers from the powerhouse reserve, the 7-hectare reserve beneath the Fernhill walking track down to the lake. We've had a budget, a forester has given us a $300,000 budget to remove all exotic trees so that we make this a truly New Zealand native precinct. We've asked the New Zealand government for approval to base a mechanical lift structure there. It's currently a funicular model, but with further geotech investigations, we might change to a funiform model or an aerial railway model. But in essence, we're trying to take what in the 60s was a dump site for this area to make it something that's truly beautiful, just like Kelly Tarleton has done with the disused sewer in Auckland. We hope that we can, with support from the three of you in the reserve management plan, make this a future New Zealand native tourism site for nationals and internationals to enjoy, as well as our native birds to thrive. And finally have a powerhouse international convention centre there, just along from Hotel Alley. So our plans for this precinct are quite significant. I'd like to finish by asking you to consider acknowledging what we're doing as per the wording and the 20 points we've given you, and also consider supporting what we're trying to achieve here. A win for Maori, a win for Pākehā, a win for resident, a win for visitor, a win for our native fauna and flora. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have one.
Councillor Wong.
Chair. Firstly, I just want to say I love your bold vision and the aspirational ideas around conservation. And to be fair, I didn't know much about your project other than what we've read in the media. So to actually see and hear some of these projects, it'd be interesting to see what it might look like in the next 50 years. I guess my question to you is, what are the biggest hurdles that you foresee coming up in order to see this vision through?
It's a good question, Matt. Clearly, the first one is planning. Unless we can get planning support through the reserve management plan, to Jeannie's team at council, through our fast track application with the New Zealand government, we're going nowhere. So planning is the first cab off the rank here. We have to, we're committed to the next year or two to get planning sorted. I agree it's bold. I agree that trying to find win-win for everyone makes a lot of work. But I think, we think it's worth it. We think, as you say, that the vision here for the next 50 years, it's worth it for this generation to have a go. So the biggest problem at the moment, the biggest hurdle first is planning. If we can get everyone to agree to what we're doing, then our view is that it will be mechanical from then onwards.
If you don't get fast track approval, because it's challenging, shall we say, your other option, what's your plan B, is through resource management consent, I would assume?
I think our plan B would be to reapproach the Ministry for the Environment and say, where have we gone wrong here? What can we do? And get back in their face and say, okay, we've heard what you've said. We'd like to make these changes. We'd like to go again.
And are you speaking with Wild Conifer Group as well about removal of exotics?
We haven't. We've approached a forestry harvesting company to remove all of the exotics from that 7 hectare region as a commercial activity.
Oh, right, okay, thank you. And finally, one simple question. Do you think you'll get kakapo up there?
Oh, look, absolutely.
Right, you got my vote.
I'm quite serious, absolutely. If we can achieve what Zealandia have achieved, there is no reason we can't have significant numbers of kakapo, takahe, kiwi, all thriving up there. It's not just the flying birds. Absolutely. I think it's a very exciting future.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Guy.
Thank you. Yeah, echoing councillor Wong's comments, it's been interesting to see more detail to it, because as councillors, we're kind of just waiting for the fast track things to show the light of day and show us what they're actually encompassing. Again, the value of our requests for site visits help me to understand, because all of this in your precinct concept sketch, including the conference centre, is that on reserve land, or is that some of that private land? Like, is all this sitting within the Ben Lomond Reserve piece itself?
Good question. Everything in green is either reserve land or dock land. Dock have the segment in this corner here from the old Girl Guide activity camp. Thank you. Yep. And apart from that, it's all reserved. And so
And your funicular trails, you've got one heading off Suburban, is that coming out the top of Fernhill?
Correct.
Area, and your saddle funicular that goes up to Ben Lomond saddle itself in your vision?
Correct.
100% understand where you're coming from with the Zealandia impacts. Regular time spender in Wellington, and appreciate the fauna that are turning up right in the CBD from that predator fencing and all of those things. You know, my cry of the day, where's the money coming from? We talk about PPPs, and one of the things we're always saying here is, please, central government, no unfunded mandates, don't tell us to do things that we haven't got any money for. And, you know, we see these bold and aspirational visions, which I agree with you, it would be fantastic to pull off, and also appreciate the opportunity to create value uplift from public land, and how can we better partner and work together with entities to do that. How would you see things like predator fencing and the development of this happening? When you talk about a PPP, what does that look like from a funding perspective for you?
Yeah, it's such an important question, Councillor Guy. RMP Limited's commitment right from the start here is the acceptance. There isn't funding in council, in DOC, or the New Zealand government to make these bold plans come through. But each year you have 1 million visitors who, many of which have large wallets. It's our view that we tap into the visitors through providing these activities, these additional activities, and use that income to build this. So when you ask the question PPP, from our perspective, the public side of this is allowing the reserve to be used for the commercial activities. And then Bowen Peak Limited side is to say, right, well, then take that income generated here to fund the infrastructure and the development. It's not appropriate, in our view, to ask council for funding. It's appropriate to ask council for planning permission and support, but in terms of dollars, our business model is around taking funds from international visitors to construct this on reserve land.
So we've heard from submitters this morning around our existing commercial footprint. Yeah, and we've got some submitters who are asking us to explore more permissibility to the east. And now we've got a precinct to the west. And I'm assuming that the housing that you're talking about occurs to the west of your map, where you're talking about 250 chalet style accommodation units. Yeah, what's your own sentiment around how that matches our values of this being an iconic recreational purpose reserve, and we're sort of starting to proliferate across the whole thing as commercial footprint?
We're not wanting to build private residential and, infrastructure on public land.
So all the housing's outside of this boundary?
There is a 56 hectare privately owned block to the west of the reserve, which is part of our application to the Ministry for the Environment to obtain fast track approval for residential subdivision under there. The Otago Regional Council transport team had pointed out to us the importance of transport in Fernhill and the near capacity at the Fernhill roundabout, traffic at peak times. And so this infrastructure that you see on this map is partly aimed to provide residential access for workers and tourists and residents to bypass the roads and come straight in to Hotel Alley into the CBD.
And your proposed ski area, is that dockland? Is that above this? When you talk about that, where does that sit?
DOC own and administer from the saddle up to Bowen Peak in a triangular fashion. The other 330 degrees of Bowen Peak above the snow line is owned and operated by Ben Lomond Station, privately owned land, part of which is a Lynn's lease.
Have you been in contact with Save Our Winters as to whether they think you're going to have snow up there in 50 years?
Our business case is around a 12-month operation, of which snow is only 3 months. We consider that providing mechanical lifts up to Bowen Peak itself will provide for the disabled, the old, the young, the infirm, as well as the walkers, as well as the mountain bikers, as well as the skiers over a 3-month period. So if in 50 years' time there's no snow around Queenstown, our business model is still set to continue. I'm amazed that 50,000 people walk up the Tiki Trail each year. It's a significant volume of people to support with this infrastructure.
So you refer to a business case, have you gone, what sort of level of detail have you gone? Like we hear a lot about, there seems to be a frenzy of transport activity and ideas in our district currently, and often that comes down to the debate around the, you know, the box office pricing as to whether it actually are these things fully fleshed out, you're in an indicative business case level, or how much detail have you gone into around the bits within the reserve and the feasibility?
I mentioned some of the costings we've got. We want to put the fiberglass walking track. We've been told that's 5 million. We know it's 6 million for the perimeter fence materials. 300,000 to cut the trees. We've made, you know, substantial inquiries in terms of our business case, but we have not formed a finalised written business case while we wait for the Ministry for the Environment to decide whether or not they will support us from our first stage application to a much more detailed second stage application.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Thank you for your submission. As I mentioned at the start, for those that have just walked in, as the chair, we'll allow around 10 minutes or so to speak to your submission, and then hopefully questions from the panel. I do apologise for running over time for those who have other appointments today, but I think you can see by the questions from the hearings panel to this point and the nature of what we're dealing with and the amount of time that submitters have put into their submissions here and taking the time to come and speak to us. That's important that people are heard. So we'll continue to push on. Thank you, Guy, for your submission and your work. And our next speaker, Vincent Wilcock. Are you here, Vincent?
Yes.
Thank you. Whatever. Thank you for coming.
Good morning all, thanks for the time. I'm Vincent Wilcock. I'm a structural engineer here in Queenstown, speaking as an individual today. So I think 5 important points have been missed or downplayed in the draft version of the plan. The first of which being proper acknowledgement of the so-called unauthorised track network across both reserves. These tracks receive significant traffic from mountain bikers, trail runners and walkers, which can be confirmed by examining the Strava heat maps of these areas. The unsanctioned trail networks are some of the best riding and running that Queenstown has to offer, and the value to the wider community is unquestionable. Also, I'd point out that many of the official tracks in Queenstown started life as an unsanctioned track. And so I just don't think it's appropriate to turn a blind eye to that network because it does provide unquestioned value to everyone. Secondly, I think the wording in the plan was suggesting that the conifers could be cut down while somehow maintaining the tracks in those areas. I just don't believe that's the case. We know that in steep terrain without tree protection, soils exposed to freeze thaw and rain will erode and become prone to landslide. And many of those tracks become unrideable or unwalkable during the winter months. Thirdly, we know that mountain biking in Queenstown is world class. It's internationally significant. And while the plan does acknowledge the economic benefits for that to Queenstown, I couldn't find anywhere where it reflected on the economic costs of degrading the quality of the riding and walking in Queenstown. Fourthly, the plan was suggesting a staged approach to the Ben Lomond Reserve's wild and conifer control, which looks very sensible, but the Queenstown hillside of it, that wasn't indicated for some reason or other. I see the issues seem very similar across both reserves. Fifth and finally, I think the existing forest is doing a very economical and aesthetically pleasing job of stabilising and protecting the town from rockfall and landslide. The recent landslide affecting the Queenstown cemetery was associated with logging operations up there, and from my experience, the cost of engineered rockfall fences and solutions could run into the tens of millions. And I'd imagine, this is just a guess, but I'd imagine the wider community would question whether that's a cost that we really need to incur that cost. Either way, I think that cost needs to be made clear in the plan and accounted for. So yeah, in summary, I acknowledge and agree with the ecological benefit of containing wild and conifer spread. The existing forest is providing indisputable social, recreational and economic benefits, which I question whether their full benefit is realised in the draft plan. I think a more detailed cost benefit analysis is required to ensure the plan accurately aligns with the community's views, and that a pragmatic plan would preserve the economic and recreational value whilst also retaining geotechnical stability of the hillside without the need for engineered fences. And it would also retain the town's iconic visual landscape. Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. One question from me, Vincent, is where everywhere you look, the vista, the views, world class. Where do you see an end point of trails that are available to riders, walkers, or whoever here? Do you see we just continue on, or do you see a point of where enough might be enough, or you're looking to expand, continue to expand trails and networks? I'm just saying, do you see a point of where that might end?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a limit to the amount of tracks. As you build more tracks, there's a law of diminishing returns, I guess. And yeah, I think the existing network is compact and local to the town, which is convenient to everyone, and it works well. And if you fell all the trees around town, then that would have to spread out. But yeah, I mean, I see value in keeping it compact around the town.
Thank you. Councillors?
No.
No.
You asked my question.
Sorry, man.
I'm-
Guy?
Thank you, Chair. I look at Project Tohu out on Coronet Forest, where we've taken down trees and proliferation of planting and biking trails and things being established. Do you see any future benefit in that staggered removal and native forest coming up? I mean, it's a transition period, isn't it? But do you see that there is a need, what there is, over a replacement strategy?
I think what's happening on Coronet Peak's great, but I would point out that the 6 months of the year almost, those trails are muddy and unrideable because there's no tree cover over them. So perhaps a more staged approach is a more sensible way of going about it rather than, widespread felling.
Thank you. And you heard some conversation earlier around the current unauthorised tracks being across private and reserve land. How do you envisage as a user group we should look to address some of that?
I guess you have to bring a room of people that have been involved in their building and sort of understand the trail building process and yeah, come up with ways where they could be adopted into the official network. I appreciate that you can't adopt a track that isn't within your own land. So
Is there a trail building process, or is it kind of ride your bike through at pace and bash one out? No, how does it work?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of creativity and hard work has been gone into by just random individual people that love to do it. And yeah, again, I'll point out that Queenstown has become a world-class riding destination off the back of these people's hard work and creativity. And if you just turn a blind eye to all of that and don't even acknowledge it in the plan, there's a bit of an impasse, you know.
It's happened pretty quickly, right? The rise of it, as far as the growth of this as a recreational sector. And, you know, I do look at the concerns around the environmental impacts and conflicts. I think I've travelled a lot through Tasmania and looked at the same impacts that we had in a lot of their forestry areas, with very quick and without a framework for development proliferation there. Do you think there's any lessons we can learn from other areas, how to maintain this balance of iconic recreational amenity and a really fast tracking industry which does thrive off new trails, new experiences, all those types of things happening?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it has to be respectful to the environment, and it is hard to control random individuals going up there and digging tracks in, but I guess, yeah, with a bit of engagement both ways, i.e. by acknowledging at least that those tracks are providing value, you know, maybe a bit more co-working could happen.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And I think we've seen that too in the large number of you that have all submitted and made the time to let us know how important this is. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent.
Cheers.
Cheers. For the rest of your day. Thank you. Bruce McLeod, Queenstown Mountain Bike Club. Is Brucey here? Trent. Trent Yarrow from Zip Trek Eco Tours. Morena, good to see you.
Sure. Thank you all for your time. So next year I'll be in this town for 20 years. So another 20 years and I'm almost a local. I'd say, I think that what I wanted to sort of express that this is the work that we're doing here is on our way to a multi-generational change, and that some of the things that I envisaged 20 years ago, or from 2009 when we opened up Zip Trek Eco Tours, we wouldn't have seen, and some of them we would have seen. So this plan has to be robust enough and give it the guidance that it takes us to places we want to go. There definitely wasn't really mountain biking development when I first arrived, which I definitely expressed there would be. I wouldn't have thought that fire risk was a reason to shut down anything at the time. There has been significant proliferation of wildings in the region and beyond. And I think the whole view of wildings in this district has changed in that time. Like the whole view of like what's acceptable and what's not acceptable is changed. We've got a little bit of strategy and a little bit of money going towards it. But I also think that we're not contemplating what embedding investment in today is for the future. The three main things, and I'll probably get into other things, but there's three main things that I'd like to talk about. One is, and let's hit it on the head, is wildfire. I feel like it has to have commentary around a robust and risk-focused view on how to manage wildfire in a public reserve with commercial recreation with very high numbers. This is the single busiest location for tourism in New Zealand, full stop. It is literally and metaphorically the backdrop of Queenstown's tourism. And unless you have a fire break around the building, then you cannot manage the building as a refuge. It's really simple. Architectural and building specification can only take you so far. When you want to deal with risk, you remove the risk you short circuit that risk, and then you do the management. I'm so impressed with what Skyline's done in terms of specification. I think they underplay how much they've done with specification of the new building in terms of the design. From an architectural perspective, they've got, you know, experts from Australia who deal with fire risk very much beyond the building code, right? And they've put everything at it. They've thrown down everything. But we have to remove the load, so reduce the heat so the building can handle it. Without that, we don't have protection as a refuge. They've also tripled or so the volume of people they can move on that thing. So we can move a lot of people really fast. And the Ben Lomond Users Group has gone a long way to work on collaborative procedures, all overseen by FENS, to make sure that we can actually do what we say we do, which is to remove people as fast as possible when we get the alert. But if we do not take that seriously, if we do not put that at the front of our mind, then we have neglected the responsibility for a 10-year plan, which I hope is 10 years before when we go back to this plan, but it may be longer. We were expecting a new Ben Lomond management plan in 2015. Okay, we waited this long. So it has to stand the test of time. We've got an applicant talking about new development on that hill as well. That's a whole other thing, but there is a lot of people up there. So firstly, fire. I'm not with that. So with fire and removal of wildlings, I'm very aware about replanting, and we need to front foot that about replanting with non-fire creating and native forest or bushes or whatever, grasses or whatever it may be. But we need to front foot that, and we haven't also done that. We talked about, mentioned private-public partnerships. That's a great idea. It's already happening here. Like, this is already public-private. And there is, if you go to commercial, they'll be able to tell you how much money comes to council from all of the participants from the Ben Lomond Users Group. So it's already funded. It's just got to take allocation of funding in a place which I think is nationally, if not regionally, significant. So I feel like it's not carved out in the money that it's already earning, right? And I don't think that's fair. I feel like the land that we're on is degrading because of wildings, degrading because of lack of planning, lack of vision around what we are to do together. The Ben Lomond Users Group has come together and come up with some pretty spectacular stuff, ones which FENS has said is the best in the country around fire management, active fire management. And I don't think we're getting the response that I would like to see from the council. I hope that I'm giving this like in a way which is kind, because that's the theme for Arrowtown Primary this week. But like this really is like from a person who really does care about this place. And I don't want to say that the work hasn't, like, I'm not having a go, if that's what I'm saying. Okay, so let me move on to it sort of led into ecology and changing environments. The discussion around, I think there was about, we took about 13 days and 11 days and all that sort of stuff. That's and to Councillor Guy's question, it's based on KPIs that FENS has come up with around humidity and dry days and all that stuff, right? The average of that will go up. So we were told, I think it's 11, I'm not sure if it's 11 or 13 days per year, we're going to be shut down. So we came up with a plan which managed the risk outside those 13 days and then when we were allowed to open within those 13 days. It is very much beyond even we shut it down, it's now safe scenario, right? Like it's very much deeper, broader risk management. But so I've got into fire accidentally. Let's pull up fire again. So sorry, what I'm going to say, I should have written notes. I knew I should have made notes. Is I think that we need to contemplate what grazing looks like. We need to contemplate what species look like. We need to be demarking areas where we want to develop and evolve and do it in a staged way, which happens over this next 10 years. Because at the end of 10 years, if we haven't done some of that work, generations forward will look at us going, what the hell were you doing? You know, we have to set this up as at least a 10-year scenario and get ourselves set up for good work. The changes in the environment, and we're being affected still. Ziptrek still walks through the cemetery from the September landslide last year. I don't think that's appropriate. I can tell you it's not good for business. And I can tell you, it's not good for like the guests that come to Queenstown and see our place, right? It's not like it's not cool at all. And like we have to expect that the environments will change faster than they've ever been changing. And landslip is another thing to deal with. So you've got landslip and moving terrain, you've got ecology and species, you've got fire risk, and you've got wilding stuff, all intersecting with commercial and recreational. I know it's not easy. Then the last bit I'll talk about is generally, and I've touched upon it, but I feel like the aspiration of what was written is not where it should be. Like, we should be proposing a place which represents the iconic nature of that reserve, not only from tourists, but for locals, once again, who literally and metaphorically have as a backdrop. I think that we should be much more clear about what our ecological aims are to be. We should be clear about commercial and non-commercial use of it. We should be clear about a framework for multiple use and non-conflicting use as a priority over individual or exclusive use, maybe due to nature or maybe just due to the way in which it's designed. I don't think those things are clear in this, and obviously taken as read our feedback. I'm very interested and willing to get into more conversations, and I've been in some in the past. I'm not sure the things that I'm saying are necessarily being heard. Once again, I'm open to questions now and in the future.
Thank you, Trent. Councillors?
Lot to unpack there.
I think so.
Let's touch on your last point then, where you talk about commercial recreation versus recreation. How would you recommend council defines it in the Reserve Management Act to better suit, I guess, what your definition of it might be?
Oh, no, I don't think there was a definition problem. I think it's about, it's just not clear in the report because they mix up recreation and commercial recreation all the time. And it's like, wait a second, was that referring to recreation or commercial recreation? Because it is different. Maybe it's the same. There's a Venn diagram, but it's definitely different at some point. And I just felt like I was rereading the report going, what are they saying here? I think, and we've added words around multiple use and exclusivity, but I think that should be a priority because what I've seen, and I'm super glad that Paul has said around like a users group of walkers, is that walkers have not been heard as much as I believe they should be, and that mountain biking is great. I'm like a big fan of mountain biking, but it is by nature exclusive use if somebody can get run over, right? At a certain point, right? From a risk perspective. So once again, managing those risks by being clear in a framework, which is what, maybe Councillor Guy was talking about, frameworks around that, I think is very important. And talking about Tasmania, they've always had multiple use documentation around like, we prioritise multiple use. Of course, uses that are aligned with the values of this. I saw that 25 years ago, that sort of level of framework.
Another question. I hate to go there, but fire breaks. How would that impact Zip Trek? And I'm seeing over your shoulder there, we've got Grant waiting patiently to speak as well. Much discussion with his group on removal and what that plan might look like.
Yeah, and so maybe an obvious question for us was around the removal. Is it in the conflict group's focus to do the work up there? Because then we could just, grab a couple of buckets, but it's not their priority, which I totally understand. From an ecological perspective, it's just not their priority. So we have to find whatever efforts to move that forward in that zone. The fact is, it's been identified as a risk, and we should manage it. And we've got to find the money. Honestly, we've got to find the money. We've got to find the collaboration. We've got to get the documentation done. Because we were told by council that council wouldn't even support us in application to do the work, which I found a little bit shocking.
Thanks, Trent.
Thank you, Matt. Trent, for me, I think personally, I find you quite visionary. So as we sit today at 11:45, how do you see the next 10 years for Ziptree?
Massively changing. And so when you talk about the conflict of like removal of trees, it's going to be a big change. And I'm just working out what my moves are. I am very up with the idea of the safety aspect of that, but I'm also up with the idea that we're doing ecological work which we can build on. So Ziptree's got to change its story. Ziptree might have to move. I am working through that, and I wish I had a solution that I could give you today that I could put into this plan. But we're going to have to move and change. Even the trees that we're in have been in for 15 years. Some of them, like, I don't know, they've been working hard for a while, and they might want to do their work in 5 years. So that's totally cool. Like, we've got to be adaptable. But this is the question around the plan, is how adaptable it is. Is it for a new application for a ski field and a funicular? How adaptable is it for hovercraft and, you know, drone flying? How adaptable is it for all this sort of stuff that we haven't seen yet? And most of what I see with the plan is how do we deal with what we've got now and get it current day? Now, once again, I don't know what the future states are going to be, but the framework should be there so we can manage them. So we're clear on what the priorities are for it, because there's lots and lots of conflicting priorities, from an individual user to a group, to a commercial entity, to an ecologist, to someone who's into risk management and geotech. Like, there is a reason there's trees on that hill, and one of them is because of landslip. Like, we would all be in trouble if that was clear land. And so we have to balance up all of that. So how does this plan give us the structures that will enable us to move relatively quickly on this stuff? Because otherwise, I can tell you, we all get mired in RMA stuff and council arguments, and it's a terrible waste of energy when so many people are passionate about this place. So I don't know, I hope too big probably for this management plan, and we can't change it specifically, like, fundamentally now, but like, how do we create the openness for future without losing the values that are important today and in the future?
Thank you. Councillor Guy, finally.
Thank you. My question's around leases, licensing, subleasing, all of those fun bits of being a commercial operator on public land. You know, I'm looking at everybody's interests up there. We've got like one walking permit in each reserve. We've got a couple of mountain bike and guiding permits. I know you've brought to the table different challenges with your leasing and licensing. We often hear that it's just very challenging an environment to deal in commercially. If you could give us any comment around that, what would be the one thing you'd say around being a leaseholder or licensee in our reserve spaces?
Yeah, like, for me, when negotiating my lease, which is still not complete, which is due in December, I just want some transparency from council around what they're charging people. And I'm not saying specifically, but generically, by average, by type, by area, because I've still had zero information about what anyone else is getting charged. And I understand completely that everyone's use case is different. Everyone has different daily requirements or volume requirements or impact requirements. But I still have zero transparency on what is a fair deal for anyone who's going to lease with council. And until that happens, it's going to cause legal, and I can tell you, your council's legal bills will go up because that level of transparency is not there. Like, I'm quite shocked at the way leasing is being handled. That's a now issue though, but it is important.
Thank you. Thank you, Trent.
But I might as well get them all out today.
Actually, Trent, would you know how many of your customers use the Tiki Trail?
No, we don't. It's a low percentage, but I really think the 50,000 people is important. And that, I'm not sure whether it's a low or a high figure, For years, I've said, oh my golly, people have no idea how important Ben Lomond is, the saddle is for our community. And one thing to add to that is, I'll stop adding, is a lot of locals go up there very regularly. I meet them. That's my daily walk, that's my weekly walk, that's my 3 times a week walk. And I think development of that trail and an evolution of that trail is important for our town because it's the main interface. And then therefore, what is the story we're telling whilst on that trail in terms of ecological management, in terms of goat management, in terms of all that stuff?
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, on my run sheet here, it says morning break. And we're just about at lunchtime. So I am mindful, as I mentioned earlier, of people that are here expecting that they will be heard at a certain time. Councillors, are you keen to push on? Would you like a 5-minute break? Let's go. Cool. Apologies once again to those that are waiting to speak on their submission, but as I mentioned, and as you've heard, it's a pretty chunky issue and policy that we're dealing with. So we're going to allow people to spend a lot of time with their submissions to be heard, to receive questions, and we'll be through it hopefully soon. So Grant, thank you for being patient. Grant Hensman from the Tapunui Wilding Control Group. Back to you at long last.
Thank you. Well, got that pile of paper over there. I don't need to read through that, which is our submission. So thank you for your time today. I'm Grant Hensman. I'm chairman of the local Wilding Control Group. I think a fair bit of it's been very pleasing listening through the submissions to hear the comments and the awareness of the wilding trees, and it makes me realise that part of the job we've been doing is getting through. The WCG has submitted on a number of points which I believe we can take as read, and which I don't intend to go over point by point. I would like to elaborate though a little bit in the time available on the thrust of the proposed plan as it relates to the wilding trees. The plan introduction, point 2, vision, begins with the statement, Ben Lomond and Queenstown reserves a highly valued biodiverse landscape. And I'm concentrating on the biodiverse part there. I'd add at the moment, in part, maybe as far as the biodiverse goes. This was certainly true 150 years ago. In my memory, 50 years ago, it was also true, but less so than in previous times. And even less so today. You see the trend? As you've all, I'm sure, walked up Queenstown Hill under the monoculture that is the present wilding conifer forest, please explain to me, because I'm a wee bit slow on the uptake sometimes, where is the biodiverse part in that setting, underneath those wilding trees? The next section, section 3, in the introduction refers to mana whenua, which I'm not qualified to speak on, but it does talk about a concept that we can all relate to, which is mara, or the life force of something. Once again, can you explain to me how that life force remains unchanged under the wilding blanket trees? There's no biodiversity. There are no views. There are no sunsets and golden tussocks with rocks in between, which you get, and I'm sure we've all appreciated Cecil Beck and the Remarkables in that setting. And there's no wind in your face, which I think is one of those true life forces. And I think we can all relate to that concept of that. All of these points will encompass the entire reserves and beyond if the wilding problem is not eliminated. If we don't do it, what will do it? And doing nothing means it will change. That change will eventually see, as mentioned, the whole of the reserves covered in the monoculture, with the resultant loss of opportunities and benefits that currently exist. I'm here to tell you, there's no halfway house in this battle. And that is because we're bailing out a boat with a leak in it, and have been for 16 years. Eventually, we're going to get tired, as we are seeing signs of already, and I refer to the reduction in the wilding funds both nationally and locally through inflation and less allocation. That is happening. All the while, whilst the problem continues to seed and spread. I'm afraid if I was a wee bit like gravity and never sleeps, stops working, then that boat that I'm talking about sinks. And that is a real danger for it. Well, it's what is on the horizon. What is recognised in the objectives under section 12.4, where it talks about actively managing invasive species. In the case of wilding pines, I would submit that should read eliminate. Now, lastly, I'd like to point out the increasing fire danger, which has been touched on, that the wilding pines represent, which isn't the case for native species to anything like the same level. This in turn, under the current policies, leads to an increasing periods of reserves closure, which is contrary to all that this plan represents and what the public wants. And those things are just interrelated. I'd like to close by perhaps going back the full circle to the opening comments I think that Jenny made. And she made a comment there about the open space plan. I'm not sure what exactly the open space plan is, but if I take it literally, I think it means open space. Wilding conifers aren't open space. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Grant. One of the submitters talked about the full benefits of wilding pines, geotechnical stability. Do you have a comment around that? You covered that off.
I realise I'm old enough to remember part of the hill up here when it was cut over, or when my father cut trees down with the first gondola, and there was a big fire up there that he used to clean up the resultant slash, and had all the locals there. And I can remember as a very young child coming down the hill, coming across a couple of local identities who helped me roped in to be the upper backstop, as he called them. And there was only scattered trees above the bluff. And if you look at those early photos of Skyline, that was the case only a few odd years ago. If you look at the earlier photos, there were no trees up there apart from the patch of beach. And I look for, and having been involved in some considerable costs, which is true for rock wall fences and that, and I look for evidence of that down below. I'm not saying you can't get rock walls, but I don't see great evidence of that. And I think the event which I really want to have to bring up about the recent rainfall event in 23 and that was a function of water being redirected and concentrated into loose fill that the tracks were cut from, rather than failure in the place itself. I think the geotech reports would point out.
Thank you. Councillor Wong.
Firstly, I love what you do, and being a great admirer of the work of the group as well. We've had a lot of submitters talking about the amenity value and of mountain bike tracks specifically. And apologise if this is a leading question, but you struck me as a chap who gives straight answers, which is nice. Is there compromise with members of the community and yourself or your group with having wilding pines on these reserves? Is there collaboration opportunity? What does it look like? And if there isn't, happy to hear that as well.
Well, I think it's a stage process. I think simply funds will mean that there's much and all as in our business, we would like to see them gone tomorrow. And the reason we want to do that is it stops the maintenance. What's perhaps not widely known at the moment is the government gave a great deal of money, a government, and a lot of work was done. That work was 4 or 5 years ago. the main problem species, Oregon trees, takes somewhere around 7-8 years at the earliest to seed. And you have to go back and do another sweep and maintenance. That funding has been reduced significantly, and we're now, this coming year, $2.7 million shortfall in maintenance. Now that means that Cecil Peak or the Remarkables or someone in the backcountry work that we're in progress that we've made, we're going to have to make some hard decisions. What's going to get it and what's not. As that relates to what you're saying, unless we get rid of the seed sources, we're never going to win this. And I fear that eventually people, ratepayers, are going to get tired of paying.
Yeah.
Why would you just keep paying to bail out the boat when you can fix the leak? I think that process will take time to answer your question, and there'll be time for a transition, whatever we are.
Very
The sooner it's done, the sooner we all save money.
Thanks, Ron.
Councillor Guy.
Thank you. This has been a huge education piece for me in my time on council, and all credit to you for the work, and in particular taking us up and showing us what happens and where the seed goes, and knowing that the main faces we're fighting this on, one in particular being Queenstown Hill.
Yep.
You know, we're talking about the absolute present urgency of a fire break around up here. We know we've got our plan for the gardens. With the diminishing funding pool, because of jobs for natures and things going, where do you see the priorities sitting as far as we're talking about staggered and which bits might remain later, but where do we go in hard first and have the most impact?
I think everybody would have a slightly different view on that, as you do around the day. I think we've got to maintain those areas that are not getting reinfected. The ones that aren't getting reinfected are like the Shoriver Valley, down at the Roaring Meg, some of the places along the Remarkables, we're seeing the drop off in maintenance in those areas. Other areas, it's just constant. Queenstown across onto the Middleton's land, it's just every year the wind blows and it's drought. And so you're not really winning, and you're pulling good money after bad if you don't get rid of the seed source. Unfortunately, the seed knows no boundaries. So if you let the next piece go, it just goes further. It's an unenviable
And coming up with other ways to fund it, particularly where we might have partnership around other stakeholders.
Yes, the government, in my view, it's a national issue, and I would that seed rain, and that you can't win here locally if they lose in Central Otago or the Mackenzie country. This is a national problem. It has to be solved nationally, and in that respect, the government is naive and unbusinesslike in its approach to the wildland problem.
And so do those people who already say to us, give up, you're not going to win. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say to them, do they realise all that goes with that? So you're talking about very quickly, and it would be already, Cecil Peak turning green, the Remarkables turning green. As I spoke to earlier in the submission, the biodiversity, walk underneath these trees when you go to Queenstown, that is the future of all this country. So recognise the fact that unchecked, they take over 5% of the country's land around. The costs go up 30% per year, and that's when I make the comment the government is unbusinesslike, because it's either saying we're going to let the whole country go and not do it, or we're happy to pay a 30% compounding increase bill when we do finally get around to allocating money to it. For me, that's no business when we do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you.
Adam from Commonage Developments Limited. Adam Copeland. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your submission.
Thanks very much for your time. Yeah, look, I guess I sit here in my capacity for Commonage Development, so we're involved with the party that's purchased the land at the top of Vancouver Drive. My involvement in Queenstown. I've been here for 14 years, so not quite 20 as treated, or certainly not great, but to have been here a long time. I've got young kids, so I've grown up in this community. We spend a lot of time in the recreation reserves, and we really do appreciate them. So the key things I just want to convey here, obviously we made a submission. I'll try and keep this as brief as I can. Just to reiterate, so that everybody understands that we do have an easement, like there's an easement being granted through the reserve area from the common land through to Curie Drive. And it's just to make sure that the plan, as finally put in place, just accommodates the establishment of that type of infrastructure. There's very few references to that currently, and that is a piece of infrastructure that will actually be really beneficial for access to the Queenstown Hill Reserve. Currently, there's only one access point into the Queenstown Reserve, and we're certainly keen to see better access points in there. And from our perspective, that commonage development, we are very keen to help try and create better access into the reserve from that site as well. We've had some initial discussions with parks and reserves, and certainly keen to develop that as we push forward in terms of what we're doing in the college. And just so that's the first one. Make sure we actually, the reserve management plan does set up the ability to establish that infrastructure. And then secondly, just around, there's been a lot of talk already around the wildland conifers and that control. And then I'm certainly interested in hearing about the diminishing reserves and resource available. Just very keen to work with council as best we can and create as much efficiency as we can. Sometime over the next couple of years, we will need to establish some sort of plan to remove the conifers from the commonage site. So there's 10 hectares there. We are boundaried on all sides, right around the top of it by the reserve land. And we just want to make sure that council's happy in terms of efficiencies and allowing us to assist wherever we can on any of the kinds of removal up there that can happen at the same time. So again, I just wanted to make sure that the reserve management plan can cater for that. I certainly helped it along. I was a lawyer in Victoria during the Black Saturday and was part of that Royal Commission, and seeing a lot about fires and what happens, and we definitely do have a problem. And if we've got private parties that are really keen to be involved and assist with the removal of those conifers, I think council should be leaning on that wherever they can.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Wong, yes.
No, I think
you're fine. Yeah, I'm fine. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, I'm fine as well. We're going to go and have a look.
Yes. Yeah. Well, for those that have just come into the room who might not have sat through this on the start, we are the hearings panel is keen to do a site visit, get out there in amongst and have a look, as opposed to continually reading maps. We like to be out there having a look firsthand. So once we get through to the end of today, then we'll decide as a panel where we want to head in terms of a site visit and affect the parties.
We do have a lot more information coming together too. Like we're right in the middle of all the engineering and all the planning, the master planning for the commonage, but that we're very close to being able to deliver that to council to show what the plans are. We've done a lot of work on that easement, the engineering of that, and how it needs to be aligned. Just in terms of making sure we've got compliant road grades and all that kind of stuff. So it is actually starting to come together reasonably well in terms of where that stuff should be going.
So that'll give us some detail on where the reserve boundary is a little bit unclear, I guess.
Yeah.
Great.
That was, my questions were sort of around just understanding, like at Curie Drive, sort of a rival area, and just getting my own head a bit more around Commonage and Silver Creek residential development and where and how that would connect to the reserve spaces. So I think those are things that a site visit will help me just cement on, but no, thank you for.
Great.
Those bits.
Thanks, Adam. We're back in touch very much. Thank you. Kelvin Middleton, thank you for being patient. Not a good day for the Highlanders yesterday. See it.
Good afternoon, thank you, Chairman and councillors. I've pretty brief points really. My name's Gal Middleton, operator of Queenstown Farm behind the reserve. So I'm specifically talking about 13.2 management plan on Tapunui in particular. I think from our submission, one of the big things that we want more clarification is on there seems to be quite a splattering of, there's no clear definition of any boundaries. Even on the information days, my daughter went up to the walkway and I think councillors or QLDC were there and even they were sort of unaware that the basket of dreams is on private property. So we need to have a very specific line drawn in the sand regarding boundaries, because there is the urban sprawl of the walkways and the walkers and the bikers and everything. So which is obviously as a private landowner a huge issue. It's interesting hearing people talk about sanctioned versus unsanctioned tracks. It's quite irritating when you actually own private land for people to think, well, we've been doing that a long time, we can continue doing that. And part of me agrees that should be the same with reserve land. I think we're going to be very careful with, because what's being done should be done, isn't the correct way. In the past, I want to thank the council. I think they've done really well. We've had huge issues with dog control or out of dogs. And finally, there's been management put in place where there's no dogs up there on the walkway. I know there still are, but that's an ongoing process, and I congratulate. I think there needs to be specific information in the 13.2 plan about, again, no dogs on the walkways. I think also we need to be aware of, we talk about unsanctioned versus sanctioned things. There's some companies that are operating, or not even companies, but private people that have rock climbing and all this sort of thing. And I think it's becoming a real worry. I think it should be for the council. It is for us, that people think because we've been doing this so long, we can continue doing it. And I mean, I cannot believe in the last year when the poor young gentleman fell off in Gorge Road, that there was no consequences on that for anyone. So I think the management plan needs to be very well aware of looking after not having any issues with people doing things where they shouldn't be doing things. So yeah, number one, just a clear definition of the boundary through the land. I think point number two, and it's been well documented today, is 7.4 in the management plan, is the wilding trees. A lot of discussion. For us as a neighbouring landowner, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in trying to maintain control of these trees in conjunction with the council and other funding, to the point that there's probably been millions of dollars put into tree management on the property. I think specifically, and I've talked to the Wild and Conifer group, we're at the point where we probably won't put any more money in because we have contributed every year. But until that seed source is contained, we are literally pissing uphill. There is just no point. We are doing it out of our good judgment to be good landowners. But there comes a point where the seed source is all on the reserve, and we just simply need it gone because it will continue to throw seed over the property. So I think, yeah, that's just probably aligned with Grant Hensman. I think they just need to be eradicated, and I think there needs to be a firm system in place for that. Lastly, I think you talk about the transport corridor through there. Yes, I know it is a reserve. But looking at the future and looking at the past, we know how much this town has changed. I think you need to be really aware in your sort of 13.3 transport corridor as such. I know we're talking a reserve, but I think that area of land, specifically on the Tapunui management area, there is going to be no traffic opportunities for Queenstown anymore. And we talk about Silver Creek, we talk about Goldfields. The only way you would ever link any possible or future roading is through that area. And I think you guys need to be really well aware of that. Likewise, up through the walkway area as such, if there was any likes of any alternative transport, I think you need to factor that into the management plan through the recreational reserve. And it's not looking at the here and the now. Who would have thought, 40 years ago, everyone would be talking about wilding trees as much as I have today, but the traffic and alternative traffic options, this is your one chance to deal with it through this part of land. So that's basically the end of my submission.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelvin. Councillors?
Yeah, thank you. Just picking up on your last point there around the gondola, how far are your discussions, because you're quite a key stakeholder in that whole discussion, and how far are you through with?
My understanding is that the tender's nearly out to pricing it up. So I know all the landowners involved, and gee whiz, I remember sitting here 20 years ago with the council and saying, there's a possible chance that you could get a road right through to Queenstown with 3 landowners you need to talk to. That's all from Frank. Yes, there's other people, involved, but if you're looking to the future, that was where. So yeah, no, it's certainly down the track, but of course, many hurdles to jump across.
Councillor Guy.
You spoke about the challenge between the unauthorised and authorised. Is there room to move on some of those as far as if you were working with like a Trails Trust conglomerate of mountain bike users, or is the area that they just wouldn't be?
I'll be straight honest. At the moment, we find the mountain biking fraternity absolutely out of control. The tracks that they've put on private land, and now they think as of right theirs. There has never been one talk to us, no conjunction work done with us as landowners. The walkway up the back of the hill, there is no legal right, there is nothing has ever been signed by any parties to do with that. That is just done out of goodwill. So we're happy for that to continue. But for more biking tracks on our property at this stage, preferably the answer is no, from what has happened to us in the past. And I think hopefully within the actual reserve, there is enough scope if they want to be talking with that through QLDC management plan. But
Thanks, Matt.
Nothing from me. That's straightforward. Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks for being patient. Right, we get down to Alice and Alice Barham. Brett Giddens, it's here. Southern Infrastructure Limited.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Afternoon.
Apologies on behalf of Alice Barham and Brett Giddens. My name is Daniel Thorne, and I've had the call up to present the submission. I don't have any written statement, but I do have a brief presentation, which I've got lots of copies of.
So thank you very much. As I said, my name is Daniel Thorne. I'm a planner and director at Town Planning Group, local planning consultancy, and I'm presenting on behalf of Southern Infrastructure Limited. Unfortunately, Ross Copeland is overseas at the moment, so I'm going to be here to present on this. So the intent of this presentation is just principally to reiterate some of the key points of the submission and expand on a few brief elements. It is very concise and focused, and I appreciate there'll be a few questions coming out of it, so I'll keep this brief. So Southern Infrastructure Limited is the entity leading the development of the Queenstown public gondola transport system, otherwise known as an offline mass rapid transport solution. The gondola system is intended to provide connectivity between Frankton Airport and the Queenstown Town Centre, travelling via Queenstown Hill, providing high volume passenger capacity and short travel times. There's a wide range of benefits that come from the system, including the provision of flexibility for extensions to that route moving forward, such as towards Ladies Mile or the Southern Corridor. The gondola system has been identified in numerous QLDC strategic planning documents and also more recently in the regional deal. So, actually, give you a couple of points to it if you like, it might help out. So just on slide 3, I've just got a couple of slides here where I go through some of the strategic alignment of the gondola with other QLDC documents. The first one being the Queenstown Integrated Transport Strategy Program, the business case. Yeah, it is terribly hard to see, I have to admit, apologies, but there's a green line that is identified as an MRT indicative corridor. And this document comes from 2017, and part of the recommended program was specifically a mass rapid transit corridor from Frankton to the town centre. Next slide is the Queenstown Town Centre Master Plan. In stage 1, they identified the need to investigate mass rapid transit options using corridor planning. And stage 2 was further investigation for a possible terminal. Now, the image there is from the Town Centre Master Plan showing stage 2 designs. And you can see there is a terminal building and also an airport connection via gondola shown in plans. Slide 5 just builds on that. This is the movement strategy of the QLDC Town Centre Master Plan. And one of the key strategy intentions is to future-proof rail transport modes, such as light rail and or a gondola linking the town centre and Queenstown Airport. Slide 6 is it's another business case about public and passenger transport facilities. Once again, this is a bit difficult to see, but the PowerPoint has been circulated previously, so maybe following you'll be able to see a bit more close up. But it does indicate here a gondola could be introduced to provide an additional option for travel between Frankton and Queenstown, and there is a red dash line that goes across Queenstown Hill and Queenstown Town Centre. More recently, the 2024 Queenstown Public Transport Business Case, there's specific commentary that has come out of that, which talks about the need for an offline solution, such as a gondola, and they recommended further investigations across the 24-27 period. And the first element of that is to do more detailed modelling of the town centre in different scenarios. And then finally, the regional deal. MRT, the offline mass rapid transport, comes up frequently in Initiative 2, Transforming Transport. And there's a key element of effectively achieving avoiding congestion and delays that come from it. And the latest timing of that, I understand, is the first regional deal is to be finalised end of this year, with 2 others coming in October 26. So just coming to the relief sought, it is in very broad terms just to ensure that a gondola system through Queenstown Hill is recognised and provided for by the reserve management plan. And I found it quite of assistance to be here from the start and seeing some of the questions that came through. And I think Councillor Wong and maybe Jenny mentioned the need to be future focused and flexible and dynamic in terms of what the RMP is achieving. And I guess the gondola system is a future focused transport system, which the RMP needs to recognise and provide a pathway for that moving forward. I won't go into detail into the specific relief here, but it was just talking about to provide a specific objective to provide for the gondola system, which will go through Queenstown Hill Reserve, and a new policy, an additional tweak just to provide for the same outcome. And I understand the outcomes are supported by council officers, which is positive, but we're always open for discussions in terms of the detail. So that's all I really have, but open to questions.
Daniel, are you able to share those slides with the hearings panelists?
Yes, I sent it through
Or
email this morning.
failing eyesight?
Yeah.
Wanting to zoom in on my paper.
Yes.
Sorry.
I need to zoom in.
Cool, thank you. Questions, councillors? Councillor Guy?
Thank you. I'd just like to note an interest as well, seeing my family business logo appear there on rationale, to note that work by rationale was conducted back in 2016, 2017 on some of the master plans for Queenstown. As we all know, the conversation around different forms of transportation mode has been ongoing for many decades, and I with relief turned the page to see that there's a much more recent transport study, which I do not have an interest in at all. So just clarifying that, but also I note that you've said about Queenstown Hill, that line that went around Ben Lomond for the Fern Hill to Queenstown, is that not part of the relief sought?
No, so the relief sought here is focused on, I guess, the interests of Southern Infrastructure Limited, which I understand is focused on Queenstown Hill. But I guess the beauty of the gondola system is its ability to connect to other aspects of it, which is put the Ladies Mile, Southern Corridor. So there's opportunities that follow from that.
So the last submitter also pointed to value in protecting some of the transport corridors. Do you feel that there's been considerations around those routes, given enough that we would know where they might be at this point?
No, but I guess that's why the point of being, and even I think Trent made a comment about there's a lot of, which is natural given the timeframes that this has taken to develop the RMP and update the previous one. There's a degree of sort of catch up to reflect what's currently existing. And that's evident in the consideration for specific skyline bungee elements. And I guess I think there's a real opportunity to identify the future focused elements, so the future transport corridors as part of this, because if this is going to guide council decision making in the reserve space for the next 10 years and potentially longer, these sorts of systems will be in place by then. And it's important that the reserve management plan facilitates that pathway consideration.
Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for your submission and your time this afternoon. Right, that's the end of our submissions here today. Yes, it's up to us, Sophie, to try and figure out the days ahead. Deliberations are set to be in public, but as we mentioned at the start, we are keen to get a site visit. And so looking at councillors' schedules, I guess our options are whether we take a break, come back for an hour or a bit today to get those deliberations underway. Tuesday is out for most of us, but Wednesday is the day when the site visit could take place, or whether, and then we go into deliberations after site visit. I guess my question is for the hearings panel, if that's appropriate, to Matt and Lisa, your preference around how the week unfolds.
Yeah, no, I would be very keen to deliberate after we've had a few site visits. There's a lot to unpack there, and just getting some clarity and some eyes on the sites would be great before we start discussing. I'm fine with later in the week.
Okay, Councillor Guy.
Yeah, I support that as well. I think we'll probably just raise more questions for ourselves before looking at the sites. Be good to get those done, and I'm open. End of the week's clear for me, so.
Okay, so we have I think that we'd like to get the site visit done first, which would appear to be Wednesday as a day to do that. And then for deliberations to be scheduled after that. Staff, do you have a preference?
Oh,
yes.
do I, direction? I can do, that works for me.
Yeah, we can see what works for us.
As a site visit?
Yeah, you can set a note time and we can lay out and schedule places to visit.
Yeah. Sooner the better in terms of what, 9 o'clock start, councillors?
So just to clarify, no deliberations today.
No
Did you want to
deliberations
start?
today. You'd be keen to start deliberations today or wait till site visit? I think your preference was a site visit first.
Yeah, it was, yes.
Yeah, I think I'm the same site visit first.
If that could be accommodated then. Yes. And then for deliberations to be scheduled, of course, we can advise the submitters and speakers of when those public deliberations will start. And maybe there's an opportunity, once we have our site visit, to do a bit of an overview as to what our walk around entailed, to make everyone aware that he's not there. Is that appropriate?
Where are we going to visit?
Yeah, if you want to give us some direction, both on where you want to visit, but if there's any burning issues for yourself with the deliberations, to give us some.
Yeah, I think, well,
you know,
for me, Queenstown.
obviously we're very prepared to go into them today, but if there was some further preparation we could do around some of the really specific issues that you've seen come to the surface today.
Well, paperwork wise, it's probably just some definition around those maps and definition of the clarity of lease areas. That's certainly one that came to my mind. I'd love to get some more clarity around some of these formed tracks, or unauthorised tracks, especially at Queenstown Hill, that border on private land, but also go on private land as well. Just to give them a bit of understanding around that, and how we can improve that. Yeah, those are the standouts. And then the funicular at the Fern Hill 1 mile on Mole Creek. That's the first time I've sort of laid eyes on that plan and what he was proposing, and the area he was speaking about as well. So I just need some time to get my head around that plan a little bit better.
I think it would be beneficial for me to be lots of going on at the Skyline since I worked there many decades ago. So it'd be good to get up there and have a look as well, if possible. Lisa?
Yeah, I was the same. The different suggested arrival areas in gateways. So we talked about one at Lakeview, Kerry Drive, 1 mile entrance. I wondered about the midway clearing that's accessible, the road getting into there. Agree with Ferg around the Skyline area, the fire break kind of bit. While knowing that we don't really have the time to all do 14K hikes, let alone our levels of relative fitness. Probably not going all the way to the summits on these places, but literally touching those entry point areas. Definitely understanding these interdependencies of where reserve touches some of these new developments and transport corridors that we're talking about. Some of the things that we didn't touch on through our submissions, and they seem relatively simple in the scheme of things to address. Perhaps if we were looking at where helipads may be suggested, and one of the other ones that didn't really come up, but around the smoke and vape-free policies, I'm presuming those are kind of already covered on other council fronts. And looking at our wildfire risk, there would seem to be some weighting and support of considerations there. But just if there's anything on those that we perhaps haven't seen or thought of. The other interdependency that was in my notes was freedom camping within reserves, and judging by public sentiment and councillor vibe on that, I'm thinking there's probably nothing new that we need to be aware of, but if there was, yeah, those bits, but certainly getting some understanding of those points of arrival and the significance of our cemetery area and the Tiki Tour
place there. I think we've got some sensitivities, understanding the sensitive nature of what happened last year too, just to give that due consideration.
The only other point that I keep coming back to is how we future-proof the RMP for future commercial development. The last speaker was highlighting a potential gondola opportunity there as well. So, and I don't have the words yet, so it's just how do we actually make sure that it's flexible enough if it is going to last 10 years.
There was talk about an access trail around the bottom from the east for Seven Mountain Vikings mission. I'm trying to remember now. I'll go back to my notes.
On Lomond.
Yes, and in my reading, my query was around the land stability and things like that around our eastern fringe of it. How far, or if that has been a consideration around not expanding a lot of access and activity through that eastern boundary area. Yeah,
We've just on that, we've had some discussions around fire breaks, accessibility, power line corridors, future potential multi-use with that and trails and those sorts of things as well. Okay, so we can bring that to the deliberations.
We have to adjourn the meeting second.
Noting that deliberations will be set up.
Yeah.
Only at a later date after following this site visit.
Okay, there's no further discussion. Thank you to those members of the public who've been here today. We will adjourn the meeting. We will have a site visit on the Wednesday, and we'll advise of when deliberations take place in public. So you can be a part of those if you wish to be. So 25 to 1, we adjourn the hearing. That's Thank you, councillors. Thank you, staff. Thank you, media.